Have you ever had the depressing realization that you were the idiot all along? Like you were too preoccupied with trying to be a decent person to spot the joke, even if everyone else did? Yes, I am that person. Although I'm still unsure of the precise beginning, I suppose I should start there. Perhaps it began years ago when I initially disregarded the warning signs because I believed that forgiveness was a necessary part of love. Or perhaps it began when I said, I do, thinking it meant we were on the same team. I was so mistaken, God. I had been married to my spouse, Eric, for about 2 decades. I assumed it was a solid marriage. Max 16 and Lily 14, our two children, were born. Typical adolescent mayhem, but nothing we couldn't manage. I had enough flexibility to balance dental appointments, school drop-offs, and all the other responsibilities that come with running a family because I worked part-time as a graphic designer. Although Eric's work as a financial analyst was taxing, it was necessary to make ends meet. Despite our lack of wealth, we were at ease. Steady, or so I believed. Last Thanksgiving, things began to fall apart. The biggest betrayals usually seem to blow up around the holidays. Isn't that funny? For Eric, Thanksgiving had always been a strangely complex occasion. He felt it was overhyped, too much pressure, etc., and that he didn't care about it. In order to avoid having to participate, he typically managed to work late or arrange a business vacation. At my parents' house, it was usually just the kids and I, which was okay. Although I didn't like that he didn't show up, I assumed he was simply not interested. I take it that some folks aren't. Eric offered that we have Thanksgiving at home because his parents had passed away years ago and he wanted to do it right this year. I was ecstatic. I went all out with the homemade pies, the entire turkey, and the elegant table decorations. I even purchased those pointless ornamental gourds. In the days before, Eric paid remarkable attention. He picked up the kids from practice without my asking, complimented me, and even kissed my cheek when he arrived home from work. It was strange. Looking back, I should have known. At 6 a.m., on Thanksgiving morning, I was in the kitchen packing, stuffing into the frigid body of the bird when Eric came downstairs, looking shady, pale and preoccupied. I have a headache, he said. Asked if I could take care of the cooking while he rested. Yes, I said. No issue. By midday, Eric walked downstairs in a jacket as I was sweating through my apron, basting the turkey, and attempting to prevent Lily from burning the pecan pie. I sincerely apologize, he stated. Emergency at work. One had to leave for a little while. An emergency at work? During Thanksgiving? He rubbed his brow and sighed. I know. I'll return as soon as possible. I swear. Something about the way he walked made my stomach knot as I watched him leave the room. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't under any tension. He appeared to be at ease, almost relieved. Dinner arrived and left. My folks spoke courteously. Max quarreled with Lily about the mashed potatoes. When I was supposed to laugh, I did. I kept checking my phone. Eric didn't say anything. I put the children to bed at 9 o'clock and cleaned the kitchen by myself. He hasn't spoken yet. I didn't get any sleep that evening. He arrived about 2:30 in the morning. I responded, "You must be joking with me," as he staggered in the door. He rubbed his face and moaned. The work emergency lasted a long time. In the morning at 2:31 informed you. It was difficult. As I stood there looking at him, I thought I could hear the fracture growing beneath my feet because of the way he avoided looking into my eyes. Eric, where were you? My voice was flat as I asked. I told you just now. Tell me once more. He paused. You don't believe me? That isn't a response. He turned to face the stairs and shook his head. I'm worn out. Is it not possible for us to do this now? He retired to his bed. My stomach was in knots and my hands were shaking as I sat at the kitchen table. I had been ignoring that gut instinct for years, but now it was screaming at me. The following day, I got to work excavating. I made no hesitation at all. I checked his email. I'm not proud of it, but really, don't be proud now. The most of it had to do with work. Dull. Then I discovered her name, though. Melanie. 2 days prior to Thanksgiving, an email was sent. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Thursday. At the same time as normal, with my lips drying up, I gazed at the television. The following email was opened, and the subsequent one. I nearly dropped the laptop because my hands were shaking so much. Melanie wasn't just a passing fancy. She had existed for many years. Years. They have been emailing for more than 10 years. Inside jokes, flirtatious comments, and even a few images. Travels I believed to be for work? He had accompanied her. Did he miss any holidays? She. One thread in particular made my stomach turn. Eric. I detest having to move stealthily. Without all of this concealment, I wish we could just be together. Melanie, come on, sweetie. It will be worthwhile. Eric, this year's Thanksgiving is going to be difficult. She wants to host a dinner for the family. You'll figure it out, said Melanie. You always do. I had the sensation that my chest was giving way. I read their whole history for more than an hour while crying uncontrollably. He hadn't simply betrayed me. Behind my back, he had been establishing a life with her, and while he was slinking off to her, I had been the dumb wife, preparing pumpkin pie and stuffing. When I poured coffee the following morning, Eric was beaming and kissing my cheek. You get enough sleep? He inquired. I didn't respond. I was unable to, because I had to make a decision now, remain, face him, set everything on fire. Although I had not yet decided what I would do, I was certain that he would not get away with it. I refrained from confronting him immediately. The waiting was the most difficult part. I wanted to yell, hurl his shit onto the grass, and burn it. However, I didn't. Because if I've learned anything about revenge, it's that the best type isn't impetuous or noisy. It moves slowly, calculated, surgical. So I acted out the part. After seeing the emails, I sat across from Eric at breakfast the following morning while he used his phone to read the news. Despite my trembling palms, I maintained a composed expression. When he made a dumb joke about the weather, I grinned. When Max entered the kitchen with his hair standing up like a rooster, they all laughed. I was assuming the role of the naive wife, because I wanted time to consider my options. Information gathering is the first step. I went back into Eric's email that day after he left for work. He was a fool for not changing his password. I read more. Melanie wasn't just a passing fancy. The first love was her. After their breakup during their undergraduate years, she reportedly reappeared around 12 years ago, approximately when I was expecting Lily. Take a moment to process that. He was getting back in touch with his ex, while I was wriggling around, developing a whole human inside of me. It wasn't casual either. He had been spending Thanksgiving and other holidays with her, as well as weekends away for work, for many years. The normality of their messages was what truly sickened me, as if they were a legitimate pair. Melanie, this weekend is Lily's birthday, correct? Must you remain longer? Eric, no, she will be all right. Later, I'll make it up to her. He was discussing our daughter, my darling, as if she had been forgotten. What about Melanie? She was so entitled and so at ease, as if she had already triumphed. Next, I began to investigate Melanie. She was a divorced realtor with a college-age kid, according to a cursory search. She lived roughly 45 minutes away. She claimed to be single on social media, but it didn't really matter because Eric was obviously treating her like a second wife. The worst thing? She had a typical appearance. In a dull, PTA parent kind of way. Pretty. She's hardly the type of woman you would anticipate to ruin a marriage. Thus, it had nothing to do with her appearance. It has to do with him. She was easy, which is why he wanted her. Minimal work. There is no need for emotional work. When I realized it, I stopped crying. It infuriated me. Determine my endgame as the second stage. I didn't want to make him look bad. That would be too short-term and too simple. No, I desired for him to sense it. How I had sensed it. I wanted him to lose everything he had, including control, stability, and comfort, without even recognizing it. For the next 2 weeks, I collected proof, screenshots of emails. Hotel charges are displayed on credit card statements. He even claimed to be stuck at work in a text message, to which Melanie responded, "Just leaving now. Can't wait to see you." I made a quiet contact to a divorce attorney. She was recommended by one of my coworkers. Charlotte, the lawyer, was a shrewd individual. "Oh, honey, this is going to be fun," Charlotte remarked with a frightful, predatory smile after I had outlined the issue. Eric had apparently made a huge error by signing everything with my name. The savings account, the investment portfolio, and the home are all joint. And that he has been unfaithful for more than 10 years? I had leverage because of that. Lots of stuff. Step 3. Take the long view. I began to listen to Eric more intently. His routine, his habits. Every Wednesday night, he had a standing work dinner, which was clearly code for screwing Melanie. He would depart at approximately 7 p.m. and return at midnight with a hotel soap odor. I began sowing seeds at that point. He was going for work one Wednesday morning when I remarked nonchalantly, "You have that work dinner tonight, right?" After a brief moment of hesitation, he grinned. "Indeed, the late one. Do you want something packed for you? Most likely, you won't have time to eat." He chuckled. "No, I'll be all right." At precisely 7:15 p.m., he departed. That evening, I called him after waiting until 8:30. He didn't answer. I sent him a text. "Hey, how are things going?" No response. I sent another SMS at 10:30. "I'm beginning to worry. Tell me if you're all right." No response as of yet. He arrived home at 11:45. I appeared anxious as I sat on the couch. "Where did you go?" I inquired. He let out a sigh. Work was delayed. I bit my lip and said, "Oh, I was concerned." He kissed the top of my head and apologized. "I'll text you next time." Next time. Correct. My entire plan was ready by the next week. The divorce papers had been drafted by Charlotte. She wanted to time it just so. So she advised me to wait to file. She remarked, "You want him off balance. You want him to believe that everything is all right. At that point, you strike." Thus, I became the ideal wife. I began to dress up more, prepared his favorite dishes. Little notes were left in his briefcase. Even though it made me want to throw up, I started having sex because it was part of the plan. What about Eric? He devoured it. He believed he had won. Eric's emails became a bit more passionate, so Melanie must have noticed. "Eric, at home? Things are becoming more complicated. Do you need to slow down?" asked Melanie. "Eric, no. Simply figure out how to deal with it." Melanie was starting to feel anxious. Eric was attempting to balance being the side piece on the side and being the ideal wife at home. He was unaware that the walls were getting closer. I stepped it up 2 weeks before Christmas. It was 1:30 a.m. when Eric returned home. This time, I had a bottle of wine open in front of me at the kitchen table when he entered. I had taken care to smear my eyeliner as though I had been crying. "Is everything all right?" he inquired. I gave a head shake. "I'm not sure, Eric. Is it? What are you saying?" I got up, went to him, and gave him my phone. I had opened an email from Melanie, the one in which she expressed her excitement about spending the entire weekend together. The color faded from his face. I lied and said, "You left your laptop open." I didn't have anything in mind. However, I discovered this. He parted his lips, then shut them again. "It's not what it appears to be." I grinned. "Excellent. I wanted him to say precisely that," I said. I need some time to process." He gave a nod. "Obviously, I get it. Probably to contact Melanie and begin damage control." He headed upstairs. I poured another glass of wine, sat down again, and grinned to myself in the meantime. The worst was over, he believed. He believed that I was upset and hurt, which is precisely what I wanted him to believe. Since the actual storm was approaching, Eric began treating me like glass after that night. He had returned home sooner. He left his phone on the counter, face up, as if that would prove something. He even recommended treatment, which nearly made me chuckle. Counseling? After more than 10 years of infidelity? He believed that some introspective discussions and I statements would resolve this issue. I gave him the impression that I was thinking. When he proposed that we start fresh following the holidays, I nodded carefully. In the meantime, Charlotte and I were preparing the trap behind the scenes. I had already emptied the joint savings account, but Eric was unaware of it. I quietly moved money into a new account in my name alone over the period of 2 weeks. There was hardly $2,000 left when I finished. Charlotte made sure everything was legal, since I had proof of the affair. Community property rules were on my side. Next was the house. Eric didn't know that I was meeting with a real estate agent while he was acting like the remorseful husband. Charlotte's suggestion, We had prepared the necessary documents so that, upon filing, I could list the house for sale right away. The court would side with me because I had custody of the children and the evidence of the affair, even though it was in both of our names. After the house was sold, half of the value would go to Eric, less the fines for adultery. He would therefore go with far less than he had anticipated. Then there was the nuclear alternative, the children. Winning custody wasn't all I was going for. I was going to make sure Eric had a custody arrangement that would prevent him from seeing children without a lot of work, supervised travel, contacts observed by the court. This is all because his past of cheating revealed a pattern of dishonesty and unstable behavior, Charlotte's remarks. Not my. I continued to perform the role in the meanwhile. I made pancakes for the kids one Saturday morning. For the first time in weeks, Eric appeared at ease as he sat at the kitchen island sipping coffee. Lily was sketching at the table while Max sat next to him, discussing a new video game. It should have been comfortable, domestic, joyful. Rather, I experienced nothing. Eric saw me observing him. He grinned. Are you all right? I returned the smile. Indeed, just pondering. He stood up, came up to me, and embraced me. He said, I'm so grateful that you're giving me another chance. I nearly burst out laughing at him. Rather, I murmured, me too, leaning into his chest. He was taking a shower that evening when I entered his office. I opened his email while seated at his desk. I had already preserved the good communications, but he had begun removing others, presumably in an attempt to purify the evidence. The ones that would portray Eric as an emotionally distant cheater, and Melanie as a homewrecker. However, I had never seen this particular email before. Melanie, we must speak. It's time to quit acting, in my opinion. I looked at it for a while. Give up acting? Was Melanie beginning to see what was happening? Or was Eric being ambivalent? I gave it a click. You promised to figure this out, Eric. I don't want to wait any longer. You must let me know if you won't abandon her. Oh, it was there. The command. Upstairs, I heard the shower shut off. Eric was humming. When his mistress was giving him deadlines, this man had the audacity to go about the house like a typical spouse. After shutting off the laptop, I got up and made my way back to the kitchen. Lily was reading on the couch while Max continued to play video games. They appeared very tiny, so oblivious to the approaching storm. After a few minutes, Eric came downstairs, his scent reminiscent of shampoo. He grinned. Want to see a film this evening? Yes, I said. First, let me tidy up. He took a seat beside Lily on the couch. I felt a moment of sadness as she leaned against him. For them, not for him. Because my children were going to lose the appearance of a steady family. Then I recalled all of the Thanksgiving weekends he and Melanie had spent together. The time Max had a 102-degree fever, and I spent the entire night holding him while Eric was away with Melanie at some beachside resort, and all those school performances he missed due to work trips. Abruptly, the melancholy vanished. The following day, I took action. I gave Melanie a call. I am aware. I'm sure you're asking why I would give her that kind of praise. However, I was phoning to make her feel uncomfortable, not to confront her, to cause her to question Eric. On the third ring, she answered. Hey, I said. Hello, Melanie. It's Rachel, Eric's spouse. Quiet, I said with ease. I just wanted to let you know that Eric and I are doing really well. In fact, we're considering reaffirming our commitments in the spring of next year. I thought you would be pleased to hear that because I know you two are close. Melanie cleared her throat. Well, absolutely. That's fantastic, I added softly. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I just wanted to follow up. Woman to woman, you know. Yes, she replied firmly. Very good. Well, I appreciate you listening. Enjoy your wonderful day. I then hung up. The problem with insecure women like Melanie is that they can't cope with not being the center of attention. Doubt was sown by that call. She would begin to doubt everything. She would become suspicious. Begin pressing Eric for clarification. What about Eric? He would begin to fall apart. He did 3 days later. The night was a Thursday. He was obviously agitated when he got home from work. He had been arguing with someone, most likely Melanie, as I could see. He said, I need to talk to you. I set down my wine glass. All right. He took a seat across from me, sighed, and rubbed his hands over his face. Melanie and I are finished. Oh? I raised my eyebrows as I spoke. He remarked, I just realized I've been neglecting this family. What counts are you, the children? I was wrong. An enormous error. However, I wish to fix it. It nearly made me chuckle. Did he believe that splitting from Melanie was sufficient? That everything was somehow erased? I grinned. That's a lot of you. He grabbed my hand from across the table. He had such sincere eyes. Rachel, you are loved. If you give me another chance, even though I know I don't deserve it. I already have, I muttered, and I wasn't lying for the first time in weeks, since he was directly entering the trap. Eric had no idea what was going to happen the day I filed for divorce. The morning was a Monday. As Eric left for work with his briefcase and that foolish, self-assured expression on his face, I poured coffee, bid the kids farewell, and grinned. He believed that he had made amends, reconciled his infidelity, and was now prepared to rebuild our marriage. He was unaware that Charlotte had already sent in the necessary paperwork. Everything was ready for his signature, including the house, the custody agreement, and the financial split. My lawyer's email appeared when I was browsing through my phone at the kitchen table. Submitted to the court. Today, formal notification will be given. It's showtime. I received a text from Eric that afternoon. Eric, the meeting was lengthy. Arrive home late. I grinned. Not long, friend. I pondered how long it would take him to understand what had hit him as I relaxed and sipped my coffee. There wasn't much waiting for me. The bell rung at precisely 5:42 p.m. When I answered the door, I saw a middle-aged man in a suit holding a manila envelope while the kids were in the living room watching TV. Rachel Davis? I am that. He gave the envelope to me. You've received service. I accepted it, grinned, and closed the door. After a few minutes, Eric's phone in the adjacent room began to ring. His line at work. I looked at the screen as I lifted it up. Charlotte, I replied. Rachel, I said. Hello, Charlotte. She chuckled. He's in the workplace. The papers were just delivered. How does he feel about it? Oh, she said, honey. I believe that he is still in shock. After hanging up, I sat down to witness the fallout. An hour later, a pale, shocked Eric came home. Holding the divorce papers as if they were on fire, he stood in the doorway. What on earth is this? He insisted. Divorce papers, I remarked sarcastically. On the table, he tossed them. You're not serious. I got up and said, Oh, I'm serious. You didn't assume that I would simply let it go, did you? His face flashed with terror as he raked his fingers through his hair. We agreed to work on this. On us, Rachel. I broke up with Melanie, like I mentioned. I grinned. Indeed. That was so cute, he remarked. You're not thinking straight. This can be fixed. We? I chuckled. There is no longer a we, Eric. It has been a while since there was. You were too preoccupied with spending Thanksgiving with Melanie to notice. He opened and closed his mouth, but no sound emerged. How about the children? At last, he muttered. I said, Oh, don't worry. I ensured that they would be looked after. You will have visitation under supervision. His gaze expanded. What? Well, I continued, folding my arms. It appears that the court has a negative opinion of parents who put their mistresses before their kids. He stepped forward, now with a desperate expression. Please, Rachel, save it, I interrupted him. I have no interest. With his hands in his hair, he slid into the couch. His voice broke as he replied, You don't have to do this. But I do, I replied, because the person I was, the person who believed in you and trusted you, is no longer with us. You took her life. He sat with his head down for a long time. At last, he said, What should I do? I cocked my head. Work it out. I assumed that would be the end of it, that he would sign the paperwork, concede the loss, and blend in with his new life. Eric wasn't finished humiliating himself either. He arrived at the residence 3 days later. The time was Saturday afternoon. I heard his car pull into the driveway while I was in the kitchen, preparing lunch for the kids. He rapped firmly on the door. Hey, Rachel. Lily was at the table with Max. They gave me a tense look. I opened the door with a sigh. What? I crossed my arms as I spoke. He produced a sheet of paper. Was the savings account truly cleaned out by you? I grinned. Yes. Then he raised his voice and shouted, You left me $2,000. We had more than $50,000 in there, Rachel. I calmly answered, We did, and I do now. You cannot simply accept anything, he yelled. I can, in fact, I replied. The penalty for adults. Charlotte gave you an explanation in the documents. He laughed harshly and shook his head. You're amazing. No, I replied. You are. I could see it happen as he stood there, his jaw clenched, his ego finally catching up to reality. The knowledge that he would not prevail. He whispered, I gave you everything. I gave a snort. Yes, it's funny because I don't recall you being present during Max's all-night vomiting. Or when the gloom frightened Lily. Or the time I was by myself on Christmas Eve since you were working late. His voice was tight as he replied, I made one mistake. A single error? I took a stride in his direction. A total of 11 years of errors. How pitiful does that sound, do you know? He flushed. I cherished you. I chuckled. I was even taken aback by the icy, piercing laugh. No, Eric. You cherished my convenience. He started to say something, but I interrupted him. I said, You're not a victim here. You made decisions. You are currently dealing with the repercussions. He looked at me for a long time, and for a brief moment, I noticed a flicker of fear in his eyes instead of wrath or remorse. Fear of solitude. And I understood that this was all there was to it. He lost me, but it didn't break his heart. He lost the steadiness I provided him, which made him fearful. The safety net. The individual who took care of everything so he may live without repercussions. I said, Goodbye, Eric. Only return if it's for the children. In his face, I closed the door. Breathing heavily, I leaned against it for a moment. Then, behind me, I heard Lily's voice. Mom? I pivoted. She held her plush bear as she stood in the corridor. Will we be all right? She inquired. I knelt down, gathered her in my arms, and gave her a head kiss. I said, We already are. I had a glass of wine that evening as I stood in the kitchen and gazed out at the street, which had grown dark. Eric's vehicle has vanished. It buzzed on my phone. Charlotte texted, Charlotte, well done. He put his signature there. I grinned. It was finished. And I was free for the first time in more than 10 years. Eric's demise took time to occur. However, it struck. It struck hard. Eric was completely naked after the divorce was finalized. I made sure he didn't lose the house. He was forced to move into a small flat in the heart of the city, the kind with leaky ceilings and noisy neighbors. Only because I lacked the will to demand less, did he receive 4 hours of supervised visitation with the children every other Saturday. He initially tried to act calm, like he was going to a business lunch. He arrived at the first visitation dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt. He likely believed that he could buy back their love by giving them expensive presents, such as a tablet for Lily and a drone for Max. However, children are more intelligent than we realize. Max hardly made contact with the drone. The tablet was left in the car by Lily. The worst visit was the third one. Eric arrived late, again, for Max's soccer match that morning. With a hangover appearance, he sat on the sidelines and hardly paid attention to the game. Max then walked straight by him, didn't give him a glance. Max simply continued to walk when Eric yelled his name. Eric texted me that evening. Eric, maybe we can speak? I let him read. That seemed to be the end of it. I hoped he would eventually leave me alone and fade into mediocrity. However, Eric had to learn everything the hard way. Charlotte called me 3 months after the divorce. She was virtually ecstatic as she continued. You're not going to believe this. Oh, tell me, please, she said. He was fired. What? I sat up. Charlotte remarked. Apparently, someone learned about the affair. One of my clients was Melanie. Blatant disregard for corporate policy. I chuckled. You're not serious. Oh, she responded, and it gets better. He made an effort to resist it, threatening to file a wrongful termination lawsuit. When the HR manager quietly slid a stack of signed policies across the table, I could practically envision Eric standing in a corporate office, red-faced and yelling. So what happened? I inquired. Charlotte declared. He lost, and his professional reputation has been essentially destroyed since the affair was made public. I grinned. How poetic. And Melanie, too? Charlotte continued. She has been enigmatically missing from social media. He probably got dumped. It was too flawless. I nearly felt sorry for him. Nearly. On one of his visitation days, which was a Saturday, Eric arrived looking like a complete mess. His hair was a mess, and he was dressed in jeans that didn't fit him well and a shirt that was crumpled. I moved aside to let the children run by me as I opened the door. Max hardly acknowledged him. Lily had a hesitant smile, but gave a quick hug. With his hands stuffed in his pockets, Eric stood in the doorway. Somehow, he appeared smaller. Rachel, he said, can we have a conversation? No, I replied. Thanks for asking, though. Please, Rachel, he begged in a weak voice. I am aware of my error. I'm aware that I don't deserve. You're right, I interrupted him. You don't. He let out a sigh. I'm making an effort. But you still missed Max's last 2 games, I remarked. Weakly, he responded. I was working. All right, I replied. How are things going with you? He winced. I apologize, he said. I'm attempting to improve myself. For whom? I inquired. He blinked. What? For whom are you attempting to improve yourself? I inquired. Me? The children? I gave a head shake. Because don't bother if it's not for you. If you're not doing this because you genuinely want to change. I raised my hand as he opened his mouth to argue. I remarked, this isn't about me anymore. This has nothing to do with them. This is about you deciding if you truly want to be a good person or if you want to remain the person who ruined his marriage. He stared at the ground for a considerable amount of time. At last, he gave a nod. You are correct, he remarked. I understand, I replied. Eric was never an ideal father. He never even developed into a decent one. However, he improved. He began to arrive on time. He truly listened to them instead of trying to purchase their love. Slowly, Max warmed up to him. Lily was more forgiving. He also expressed regret to me, not in a big, showy manner. After dropping the children off one day, he stood at the door and uttered the following. I apologize. And what do you know? I trusted him. I took the kids to the beach 6 months after the divorce. Only the 3 of us. Lily constructed a complex sandcastle that was destroyed by the tide, and Max gathered seashells. I picked her up as she sobbed and assured her that we would construct another one the next day. I had a glass of wine and listened to the waves while sitting on the balcony that night after the kids had gone to sleep. It buzzed on my phone. Charlotte texted. Charlotte, how is the journey going? Peaceful, I said. Charlotte, you're worthy. She was correct. Yes, I did. Because I wasn't concerned about Eric for the first time in more than 10 years. Wasn't held up by the second shoe dropping. Wasn't bearing the consequences of someone else's errors. I had freedom. The fact that I was eventually able to move on from everything without turning around may have been the true form of retaliation, rather than Eric losing his job, his mistress, or his reputation, and being aware that he would have to put up with that. Eric stood at the door for a while the last time he picked up the children. You appear to be happy, he remarked. I am, I said. He gave a nod. Well done, I said. Take care of them. I'll. Then he went away. To be honest, there is still a part of me that occasionally feels the sting, the years that were wasted, the treachery. But I'm no longer burdened by it, because I am now aware of who I am. I am aware of my value. And I am aware that regardless of what occurs next, I've already triumphed.